Oh, there's a core question answer. Why don't modern day women give men what they want? Now, on the surface, there's a few ways to look at this, and I don't know exactly what they mean by that actually. But typically, when a guy asks that question, it's because um, he's in survival mode, and he thinks that the absolute basics of food and water and shelter and so on are all that a guy should have to bring to the table. Then a woman would raise the kids and cater to him more or less when he gets home. Most women do not believe that to be sufficient. They want someone, they want a partner, and they also want a friend. Um, Now, being being a friend to a guy, like from a guy's perspective, it's very different than being a friend to a woman. Especially if it gets more complicated, like you're having a family with the person and so on and so forth. But usually, a successful cohabitation is a partnership. It's not a hierarchical relationship. Although both need to have a successful romantic or otherwise cohabitation relationship, you need to give the other person a lot of autonomy. Guys have to be guys, and women have to be women. Now I know that's sort of a charged phrase, but it means that there's things, generally speaking, that guys are hardwired to kind of want to do, like grab a few beers with the boys after work, that sort of thing, bowling perhaps, some sort of fishing, hunting, something like that. And it shouldn't be just given out as a miser, because that creates a hierarchical um, relationship. It should be something um, that is given that is done in good faith, and both should be working towards one another's best interest. There's a concept of mutual servant. That is something that needs, and it requires good faith. By the way, this isn't just something that you could just do as a rote practice. That is what creates a successful relationship of any sort. If it's a cohabitation situation, and it's something to work towards. It's not something, like I said, it's not just a practice. It's not an obligation per se. It's something that makes the living situation better. So it's a goal to work towards. But unfortunately, as I come across a lot of these questions, and the answer usually does boil down to something like what I've said. Someone is just, it has very unrealistic expectations, and it's not gender specific. I think the question origins come from everyone, but the the inner question that's being asked, sort of, is that um, why don't relationships work anymore, or why are they so difficult now? And that is largely because of well, it's partly how we're raised. Sometimes it's not raised. We're not raised in a way that is conducive to healthy relationships in the future of any variety. And we have to work on that. And that's not something that should be just dismissed as, oh, yeah, well, everyone has to do it. Well, yes, but also some more than others. We are, and again, this is gender neutral. Everyone has to contend with how they were raised, the influences that they had when they were growing up in their formative years, whatever they were. And it could be good, bad, neutral. Usually it's mixed. So someone can intellectually understand something and emotionally accept it somewhat, or they think they do. But the thing is, the execution of an idea is that is the proof of whether one's journey of self-improvement has set in, and that's the test. That's life. So, and everyone has to do it. And, they're either not tested and don't challenge themselves and kind of isolate, and sometimes people get very arrogant and they think that they are at one level or another without having been tested or tested much, and that can lead to some very unfortunate outcomes. And also, people get tested and fail, and some people give up after that, or they give up after only a relatively small amount of failure. Everyone fails. It's all right. It's something that is to be expected, and it's healthy, because striving for perfection is very inhuman usually. It's something that just it lowers expectations, because it says, oh, you have to get 100. So if you get less, you're in trouble. Okay, what about more? Well, that's not on the test. There you go. The test is flawed. 100 is a very relatable example of what I'm talking about. Perfection is for very narrow parameters. Sometimes you need it for certain things, certain technological solutions, programming. But usually in real life, you want to aim for more than a small set of parameters, because life's too unpredictable to do otherwise. People learn that as they get a little more experience in life, and that brings me back to the original question. Some people have unmet expectations, or in some cases unrealistic expectations, and whatever they may be, people need to have been tested in life before they can have realistic expectations. And that does not mean lowering your standard. It means changing them to something that actually suits you, not something that's some arbitrary societal construct, or something your family told you or some friend told you at one point. It has to be about you, because you're the one living your life. So if there's unmet expectations, it's almost certainly because certain standards have been accepted that aren't realistic, or are not in alignment with what the person really wants, or perhaps perhaps you have poor selection criteria or inappropriate selection criteria. It's very easy to have that. And it's very easy also to idealize a partner and think, oh, well, this person fits all the things I desire. They often don't, actually. And the thing is, Again, it goes back to being tested. A partner is, dating is a test. Partners are a test in a way. You find out what you like, what you don't like. So, idealizing a partner is not a good idea because that's a preset notion. And it often comes up against the expectation of perfection, which is very. Humans aren't perfect. That is not the ideal whatsoever. We're biological beings. There's too many imprecise parameters for us to fulfill the expectation or the parameters of perfection. So, and then there's traditionalism. Now, a lot of people. Here's the thing about traditionalism that I generally object to. If you weren't raised in a traditional household, you're not going to have the vernacular and the practices of whatever tradition you're longing for. Now you can train yourself, but you have to do it in spirit and in truth, and you need to do it every day. And it needs to be something that's internalized. Now, that being said, we live in progressing times. Times are always changing. It can't be pure traditional because we have things like electricity. We have things like computers. And there are certain practices that are no longer appropriate because we're not in survival mode anymore as a society. It's not whoever's going to raid our cabin unless we have unless everyone does exactly what they're told and we have weapons and we have to shoot the raiding party. That's not the situation at all anymore. I mean, another thing, we're not farmers anymore for the most part. Like 95% of people aren't farmers anymore. We're not just trying to get enough to survive. We have much more diverse careers. Well, yeah, we have careers, one thing that's kind of modern. It's kind of new. But careers bring stability. Jobs bring stability, depending on the job. And I believe a hybrid approach needs to be taken. Like some people they like to have certain things at home. Their home be a certain way. Your home, your choice. Wonderful. But the approach needs to be modified somewhat in the modern environment. Now, as for myself, I have some of these notions as well. There's certain things I carry forward. I'm courteous. I try to be courteous to other people in person. I go out of my way to aid others as I can. I'm somewhat mindful of how I dress. And at home, well, I have some technology certainly, but I'm not one for a whole lot of the modern the modern things. I might go out to eat sometimes, but I don't necessarily like doing that for most meals, even if I have a lot of money. I'm trying to get more into cooking. That's not only for economical reasons, but also for practical ones. And also because I happen to like cooking maybe a couple times a week, depends. and also baking, which I do view as slightly distinct. But um, traditionalism can be a formula, and if it's a formula, it may not be as authentic as we like. Um, so I believe a hybrid approach is appropriate because simply saying, "Oh, it worked for them, therefore it should work for us." Well, times really have changed, unfortunately, and well, it's good and bad at the same time. So we do have to have a certain amount of discernment about that. Um, and I do have a lot of reverence for tradition, because those that last for a long time, they last for a long time for good reasons usually. However, they're not a guide. It's more like living history or something like that. Um, like take something like a fire. A lot of people really like fires, so a tradition may be built around gathering at certain points in the week or month for a campfire, maybe some barbecue of some sort. That's kind of where it comes from. But something like gathering for like bread making, let's say. Actually, that might be a good idea in some cases, but it doesn't work for everyone because we don't need bread in the same way. We just go to the store and get really cheap bread. It's not something where you have to go. I think it's a big thing. Like you go to the miller, you go to the mill, and you go to the different farms and gather the wheat, and then um, and then add yeast and make a huge batch, and then you divide it up, and it's a whole group activity, or making like gnocchi or something like that. We don't necessarily have to make gnocchi from scratch. Again, you can get it at the store. It might not be as good subjectively, but there you go. Some people find it worthwhile, some people don't. Some people don't like gnocchi. That's fine. But taking something as an entire package is usually erroneous, depending on how large the package is. And that's where people fail with most notions of traditionalism. They might say something like, "Oh, well, if you want me to be a traditional man, you have to be a traditional woman." And then they take that in a very simplistic way going forward, and they select for women who want a domestic life, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine, but it may not be what they're looking for, once they grow a little bit, because depending on what one's looking for. Okay, so they're not talking about subsistence farming here. They're talking about essentially bringing in income. If that's all that they're doing, or the overwhelming majority, and that's fine, it's honorable, but most people want more, and most people also want more than simply raising children. They want to progress in life, and that means quite possibly changing careers. You're not going to have one career at one company probably in this modern world. And that's certainly a mixed notion, but there's another huge problem with a lot of notions of traditionalism. You don't have a consistent career. you can't be simply a provider, not at one company, not for 30, 40 years. So we need to be more flexible. So again, a rote copying of a package isn't appropriate, probably. And for those that it works for, absolutely, I have no problem. What works for one house doesn't work for another, and as long as everyone's on board, they have a blessing. But what I'm saying is that it probably won't work. It's probably going to be difficult at best, and a lot more flexibility is required to have a realistic chance at a good outcome. And you may find the outcome, the aspiration changing as time goes on. You might want different things. That happens to humans, and that's okay. So, I know it's a long answer, but this is a topic that a lot of people have come up with and have wrestled with, or unfortunately have not wrestled with sufficiently. And anyways, it's difficult and it can bring suffering if it's not addressed properly. And only the individuals involved can address it. But feedback can help from friends, from internet strangers, from scholarly sources, from history books, and I view those also as stories, different stories from people who have come before. Those are historical documents or something approximating them. Not unlike Quora, people tell their stories here on Quora, and it's essentially the same thing. You get enough of them, you authenticate them a little, and you can get some very solid feedback. So, yeah, with books, you can do a little bit of research on them about the person's real life, and yeah, it can be a really good, maybe a guide of sorts, maybe just an interesting story or series of stories. But yeah, it can give really good feedback, but one has to be flexible, as I've said, and not just take something for the whole portion without discernment. They need to make their own minds.